Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicast and in partnership with Vertical Valor magazine. In this two-part series, Jack Schonely and I talk with the members of the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department's Henry 1, including unit supervisors Chris Haas, pilot Nigel Cooper, and CFO Lawrence Matelli. This is a unique project done in conjunction with Vertical Valor magazine, the Real ResQ Podcast, and the Hangar Z Podcast. The article written by Vertical Valor magazine is available now at verticalmag.com. The episode provides an insightful look into the world of the multi-mission airborne law enforcement unit. We get an opportunity to discuss Henry 1's history, mission profiles, crew dynamics, aircraft performance, and the importance of training documentation. They emphasize the significance of smooth operations, the evolution of their training programs, and the critical nature of competency and currency in high-stakes environments. We talk about the importance of collaborative efforts between law enforcement agencies, focusing on the operational dynamics of the Sonoma County Sheriff's Aviation Unit. This conversation delves into the experiences and insights of the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department's Henry 1, focusing on their teamwork and personal stories from significant events like the Tubbs fire, where they share their personal experiences, emphasizing the dedication of law enforcement officers in the face of disaster. Thank you to our sponsors, Dallas Avionics, Shotover, and CNC Technologies.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z Podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, John Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Schonely.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like they're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, threw the shotgun, threw something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
Schonely.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like they're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, threw the shotgun, threw something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
All right, Larry, take us through the TFO side of the cockpit. Talk about what mission equipment do you have on that bird, what light, radios, mapping system, all of it, and tell us about that.
So I'll start with the camera. We run the L3 MX10 camera, and then that's partnered with the Shotover mapping system, which we went to about a year ago, which has just been a game changer for us. Yeah. Radios, we run the Technosonic TDFM 9300, which our radio shop used to do a lot of the programming. I got to give a shout out to a guy in one of our neighboring counties, Contra Costa, John. He helped us with some of the programming, which then in turn turned into Chris sending me to the Technosonic operator class. So now I can do all our programming.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Which has been very nice. Little nuances, different scan setups. If something we don't like or, we want to change kind of the way our radios are set up, I just plug the computer in and make those changes real time. So that's been kind of a nice setup.
Can you briefly talk about that operator's course? How long was it? What did you, obviously we know what you got out of it as far as being able to change the scan banks and stuff, but a lot of agencies I think would benefit from that. I know we would. Well, how did you get that class and what was the class like?
The class was great. So it was a 1-day class. It was hosted down in Anaheim. Initially, when we started having John over at Contra Costa program our radios, he explained, he's like, oh, they just sent me to this class. And so I got the bug in Chris's ear. I was like, hey, that's something I'd be interested in. It'd be nice to be able to just do it live time and not have to, fly the helicopter somewhere to get it done or call our radio guys to drive up and do it. So, I reached out to Technosonic and they ended up sending me, Jim over there sent me an email saying, hey, we're having this class and I think it was in October, just a couple months ago. We're having this class down in Anaheim. It's a single day course. And so, they go over and it wasn't even just the programming aspect of it. It was like just some of the setup on the radio. Quickly I got back and first day plugged in and changed a ton of our settings. We had stuff in there that we didn't need. We had stuff in there that we needed. There was one setup we had where if you were to hit the power button, you could transfer over to the volume. And so inadvertently you'd go to change a channel. You could turn the volume way down on that channel. Well, we also have the Eagle Copters panel set up to where we adjust the volume manually by that. So all of a sudden you'd be flying around going, man, why is, Santa Rosa, why are they so quiet? Well, it was, inadvertently pushed and changed. So I got rid of that. So now that can't happen. So it was just, I recommend anybody who's operating that radio to attend that course.
That's huge. I think our primary job is to communicate with folks.
Yes.
And I think a lot of us as TFOs don't know the system the way we should. I'll take a page out of Nick Meeks's book. He talks about this technology and these later radios. We use them like fax machines, but they're really like iPhones. There's so much capability behind those systems, but we just don't know how to use them, and setting up your own scan bank, setting up the channels and frequencies the way you want them to scan as a part of that, so I agree with you. I think it's awesome. You went to that class. I never got a chance to go to something like that, but I think there's a ton of value in doing that.
Well, I'll tell you, like, Larry is a very proactive guy. Like, I give him a hard time. He's one of my best friends, so that's kind of the nature of the beast. But he's really in tune with that kind of stuff. So I think units need to identify when you have somebody that has that kind of skill set. I just look, nothing against our radio shop guys, but they program patrol car radios. I mean, as soon as Larry gets back from this class, it's like, we have this radio for like the last 7 years, and now it looks completely different and functions so much more efficiently. And it's like, well, I wish he'd gone to that class a while ago. So it's, I think units, I think it's, again, a one-day class. I can't say enough good things about it. Like it literally, talk about a game changer. So huge benefit. And I appreciate the fact that he's willing to do that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
So Larry, back to the bird. What's the light on the back? What's the night sun there?
Yeah, so we run the Illuminator Night Sun, which is awesome. For the people listening that are in this job, I can pair it with the camera. And so as I'm operating the camera, the spotlight is linked to that. I can offset it. So if I'm trying to be a little sneaky, I could be searching an area, and as I'm moving the camera and the light's moving, it's moving at a whole different area. So the bad guy thinks I'm looking for him over there. One of the big things that our camera is equipped with is an IR laser, which is a complete game changer. We for a while there, we had a loaner camera that didn't have the IR laser. So we partner the IR laser with our night vision goggles. So as we're flying at night and there's something I want to look at or get the camera on, all I do is turn that laser on, look out the window with the night vision goggles, and then move that laser to what I'm looking at. Which then in turn kind of goes into some of our tactics. So, during daytime, we do left-hand orbits like most agencies. At night, we switched to right-hand orbits. And the reason being is I have that laser at the target, whatever I'm looking at on the camera. And so now the pilot, they're on night vision goggles. He's looking out the window, seeing what I'm looking at, but also giving, helping me search. So while I'm searching with the camera, obviously, I have kind of a small picture of what I'm looking at. I'm only seeing a small little area that the camera's searching. Well, now the pilot's using the night vision goggles to look out, and they'll actually, there's been a couple times where Nigel has found somebody running. I'm searching an area, and he sees somebody running under the goggles and goes, hey mate, I need you to move the laser up and left. And so I just walk that laser right onto what he's seeing, and there we go. We've now located the guy. So, again, our tactics are kind of driven by some of our technology, and it's been nice, having such a small unit, being able to adapt to that and being able to be like, hey, again, we used to do left-hand orbits at night. And one day we're like, Nigel goes, well, why don't we do right-hand orbits? Let's try it. We tried it. And honestly, it's helped us tremendously with our rate of finding people at night, just, changing to that tactic.
Nigel, do you have any control over the light when you have somebody on the long line, that you can control the light from your cyclic?
Absolutely. The coolie hat on top of the cyclic controls the searchlight. So when we're using the searchlight in a rescue sense, it is not paired with the camera, and it just operates like a free flow light. And actually what I do is I put that out in the kind of 1 to 2 o'clock area and make it fairly wide, because you can focus the beam. And I use that as helping with my depth perception and hover references. I don't point it straight down the line. We have a couple of belly lights on the helicopter doing that.
Oh, okay. I was just about to ask you if you would do it straight down when somebody's in the line, but do you have some other lights that'll take care of that?
Yeah, we have a couple of incandescent spotlights that are angled perfectly to shine down the line. We find that the LED light frequency is not quite there yet with getting that right flavor of light, for a better word, to get that depth perception at night. And then we use the night sun for hover reference. And, the night sun for a night long line rescue is go, no-go equipment. If the night sun's not working, we do not complete the rescue. Yeah, it's that vital. So, yeah.
Oh, interesting. That makes sense.
And then, just to follow up on what Larry was saying about our tactics, just reiterate the great thing about this team here is, we're not afraid to take a step back and be like, hey, can we make improvements here? And the right-hand orbits at nighttime, it's not just about the pilot, looking for the bad guys running through the neighborhood, but by having the laser out the right side of the helicopter makes it so much easier to position the helicopter in the right spot for the camera operator, the TFO. And what we were finding when it was out the left is you're trying to look forward past the TFO. There's not a lot of real estate to see outside. Then you fly over the object and the camera tumbles. Now the TFO's all mad at you. Yep. And it's like, well, I couldn't see it to begin with. So take a step back and revisit it. And again, we kind of worked up at it and ironed out a couple of little things that we needed to, and now it's just normal.
And you got to think kind of some of the areas that we're working are rural and in this semi, I won't call them mountains because we're certainly not in the high mountains here, but in this rural mountainous terrain. And so we are dealing with obstacles. And so we can be orbiting, searching a property, but that's up on the side of a ravine. So again, it's just, we found things that meet our needs. And so I think we've just, like Larry had kind of expanded on, it's like this smaller unit, sometimes we'll throw out an idea and we'll start to do it. And then it's like, this isn't going to work. But at the flip side is like, we do something, we can kind of figure it out and either move forward with it or not. So,
yeah, I love what you guys are doing there. We talk about not just doing things for the sake of doing things a lot. A lot of times we do that. Well, that someone's like, why do you do that? Well, it's because it's what we've always done it that way. Well, you don't have to. But I kind of giggle at the right-hand orbits because I don't know if I knew that an A-star could go in right-hand orbits for a long time. We get so used to.
Well, you have to unwind it at some point. Well, but he's.
Is it require additional maintenance or anything? Or?
You get so used to left-hand orbits. A right-hand orbit seems so foreign. I remember going to the mountain course. And in the high recon for your Mountain LZs, your right-hand orbit at Hellstream, that's what they wanted you to do. And it felt to me like writing with my non-dominant hand. It felt so foreign, So it's pretty cool that you guys could take something that's not your norm and do it, for the benefit of the overall mission. I like that.
Yeah. Another real quick example of that is the searchlight controller. And when we got the aircraft, it was installed behind the TFO seat, and you get airborne launch real quick for a night law call, and forget to unstow the remote. And between the two pilots and a barrel roll later, you've got the stupid thing out of its holder and trying to turn it on. And one year we're like, well, we never stow the remote for the camera unless we're doing a medevac, in which case the aircraft's likely shut down, but you're outside the helicopter, you can stow it. And so we swapped the position of the mounts over. And so now that the remote control for the night sun or for the searchlight sits down between the two pilots, and it's so much easier to turn on. And if we do a medical transport, we stow the camera remote in its little holder because you're outside the helicopter converting it for medical anyway.
Larry, take us to the medical side. What's in the back of that 407?
A lot. So we get away with a lot. There's a lot of we use all the real estate in the helicopter. Let's just say.
Yes.
So so right behind the TFO seat. So TFO sits on the left. We have a flat we call it. It's basically a metal stretcher that was custom built for us. On top of that sits 2 different medical bags, a BLS and an ALS bag. So depending on the level of care and what we need. Behind that, so kind of right behind the head of one of the passengers, if you were sitting in the back, we have suction. So we also have an oxygen tank mounted in the baggage compartment of the helicopter. So as far as medical stuff, that's a lot of it. Also a monitor. So we have a AED monitor on top of basically all the medical equipment mounted on the ceiling. So, and that's removable. So if we're going into a call where we think we need it, we can actually fly that in on the long line with us, pull that out and fly it in. As far as a baggage compartment goes, we keep same thing. It's packed to the brim pretty much. So we carry a 200-foot and a 100-foot long line. So that is stowed in the baggage compartment along with my harness that we wear when we're on the bottom of the line. As well as a hot seat rescue device, sometimes 2. If I don't have a paramedic, I'll throw a second one in there. That way I can fly a ground paramedic in with me if I need that level of care during a rescue. We have a Traverse rescue stretcher, which is like a semi-rigid, soft stretcher that we can fly in. It's folded up, rolled up together, and you roll it out and you kind of got to taco it, but it's got like a plastic base to it. We have what we call the halfback. So it's kind of like a KED device. So if the patient has C-spine issues, I can package them in that. We commonly package, if we have to keep them laying down, we'll package them in that halfback and the Traverse. So basically they're in a stretcher with C-spine protection. And then we also carry stuff for, we do aerial platforms. So we do shoot from the helicopter. So we carry all the equipment for that in there, as well as a pediatric bag for any, pediatric medical stuff we would need. And then also the pigtail for the bucket. The only equipment that we don't carry with us all the time is the Bambi bucket.
Right. That's just for special occasions.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
Yep. Yes. Let's, a lot of our listeners, obviously most of our listeners are law enforcement and law enforcement air crews, but we have lots of listeners that are not. They're either getting into the business, they might be cops, but they're not in the aviation unit yet. And we have non-aviators that aren't even cops anymore that listen. For those of you that have been watching, we've been talking a lot about rescue and long line, and maybe they don't quite understand that. And you'll notice if you're watching that there's no hoist on this helicopter. This is all done on long line. So Chris, I'm going to ask you to walk us through and describe that long line rescue setup and tell us about that, how it works and why this is a good choice for Henry 1.
Thanks to our sponsor, Dallas Avionics, who provides innovative products to law enforcement, the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, military, air medical, search and rescue, and special missions operations. Dallas Avionics distributes OEM equipment, including communications equipment, digital audio systems, PA systems, flight tracking, and other mission-critical devices. Visit DallasAvionics.com for more details.
So long line is super unique. I can talk about it at demos till I'm like blue in the face, and people think the first thing you need to know about long line is it requires us to land and set up the line. So I'm never jumping out of the aircraft. There's no way I get a patient back into I get that 99% of rescue is done via hoist, and so It's a much different evolution than a hoist. And there's again, coming to Henry 1, it's long line. That's the best way you can rescue someone. Well, I hate to tell you, it's not. It's just another way you can rescue someone. It's not better. It's not worse. It's just different. And so I think the longer I've been up here, the more I've just recognized that there's really no perfect way to do anything. The Coast Guard doesn't use long line because I can't fly on the end of the line 30 miles offshore. That would be insane. So,
yes.
We just have kind of taken the long line and squeezed every ounce of what you can do with it that works for us. And so, when we are conducting a long line, essentially we need to locate our patient first and foremost in the air because that essentially, unlike on a hoist aircraft, once there's a rescuer dangling from the bottom of that line, that's not the time to be doing your exhaustive search for someone. You're asking the pilot can't do like, the pilot needs to be able to fly that line and not be distracted. Yes, you're still finding that spot where you initially went to. We'll talk about that in a second. And then vice versa. Being a TFO hanging from the bottom of a 100-foot or 200-foot line is also not a great place to be doing your initial search for a victim. So when we get overhead, first and foremost, we need to locate that victim. Once we do locate the victim, we'll note it on our map inside the aircraft. So on the shot over system, we'll put a waypoint in, and then the pilot simultaneously, yes, he's got that waypoint information, but he's also, I hate to say it, looking visual cues of, okay, I see that hole, it's next to that pine tree, next to that. Okay, once we establish, okay, we've gotten our victim, well, now kind of the drawback to long line is I can't deploy a hoist and now go down to him. I need to go find a place, and we need to work as a crew to locate that LZ for us to now set up the line. Because again, the line is static, so we need to land, set up the line, and then return to that patient. So we typically then locate an LZ as close to the patient as possible. Nigel and I have definitely some epic stories, especially in the middle of the night, about sometimes LZs aren't that close to a patient. We obviously don't want to be long lining for miles and miles and miles. So it's finding that LZ, setting down, and then the initial evolution is we brief on what do we got, what size line are we going to need, what devices am I going to be taking in, and so we'll have that. Typically we're sizing it up in the air, but we sit down on the ground, and before anybody gets out of the aircraft to start the setup process, we do a brief, basically regurgitating what we probably already just talked about in the air. But hey, we've got our victim noted on the map. We're going to be doing a 100-foot long line. I'm going to take these devices with me. Everybody feel good about that? Great. And so the evolution at that point is me as the TFO going to the rear baggage compartment, which is also on the left side of the aircraft, getting my rope bag, getting my devices I might bringing my medical bags out, bring all that equipment to essentially right outside the pilot's door, which is on the front right of the 407. I deploy my line, which, we've talked about how we've evolved over time. So essentially we used to flake the line out. It was this big kind of production. Essentially all we do is we take out the top of the device, top of the long line, which is where I connect my harness into, and it's the device that gets me off the ground. But I literally just dump that bag out on the ground with a big pile of rope. I take the end of the rope, which we call a Y bridle, toss it underneath the helicopter, take the pilot's door off, because long line, the pilot needs to have his door off for the vertical reference. The door is stored in the rear passenger compartment. I hook the line up on the belly of the aircraft. We have 2 hooks. And then it's literally me connecting myself and the equipment to the line, giving the pilot the up signal. And then again, the rope is static. So he's either hovering to 100 feet or hovering up to 200 feet or maybe 250 feet. But once he gets to that hover above me, we lift off the ground and go conduct that rescue. Everything I just described, from the time that we land on the ground till we're back up into the air, usually takes about 90 seconds to 2 minutes. So wow. It's a very quick evolution to get going.
Larry, let me switch to you for a second and ask you a couple specifics here. Number one, now you're going to the ocean. You're sitting there right now, you get the call and you're going to the cold Pacific.
Yes.
What changes equipment wise and what you're wearing? And where is that equipment? Is that the hangar? Is there stuff in the bird? How's that work?
Yeah. So we, as a TFO and the paramedics, we carry our wetsuits and all our water equipment in the helicopter. So I keep mine in the back seat. If we're here at the hangar and we get the call, I run out there, grab it, and I change into the wetsuit before we even launch. So the pilot will be getting the helicopter all ready to go, fired up. And so by the time I run out there, it's usually we jump in and then take off and head to the call. If we're out and about, depending on the details of the call, there's been several times when we've landed, I've jumped in the back, we've taken off and flown to the call. And so I change into my wetsuit in the back of the helicopter.
Yeah. I was going to ask you if you ever did that.
Yeah, a couple times.
Yeah.
We actually, Nigel and I had one about a year ago. It was actually during our call out period. So kind of how our hours work here. We're usually in service from 11 in the morning to 10 at night. But outside that, we have to be available to be back here at the hangar within 30 minutes. So we got a call of a drowning or somebody drowning out in Point Reyes. So obviously time is of the essence. So I called Nigel. I live south of here. So called Nigel, was like, hey, we got this call. It's out in Point Reyes, which is also south of here. So he actually landed in a parking lot near my house. I jumped in the back, changed into the wetsuit, and we were on scene within about 10 minutes. And by the time we landed and I had the helicopter converted, Highway Patrol was out there, and they actually located the person outside of the surf. And so it was about 3 minutes from the time we landed, converted the aircraft, grabbed the victim, brought him to shore. The guy subsequently perished. He ended up not making it, but it was a pretty quick 3 minutes land, get set up, get him on, onto the shore doing CPR. So, because obviously time is of the essence in a situation like that. So
also, Larry, how do you communicate to Nigel during this long line? How's that work?
Yeah. So the difference when we do water stuff is I'm not wearing my vest with my radio. So our normal communications is radio and hand signals. But when I'm wearing a wetsuit, I don't have my radio. So it's all hand signals. And so it just kind of goes back to, how often we train. That training really helps. A lot of times I'm given a hand signal, but Nigel already knows what I want, and he's already doing it because we work we work with each other so often, all the time, every day. So.
Well, it's not Nigel's first barbecue, so it's
no.
He's done that a little bit. That really helps. Very interesting.
Nigel still gets confused though.
Oh well, we all do, Nigel. Some more than others. I'm one that gets confused more than others. Very interesting. I liked how you described, Chris, that it's not better, it's not worse. There are advantages to that, great advantages to the long line, and there are great advantages to a hoist. And you kind of walked us through that. There is no perfect way. There's places where a hoist would struggle to do some of this that could not do what you do, and vice versa. But it works good for your terrain and your area of operation. It seems to me that this system works very well for Sonoma County and what the things that you get sent to. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think as it was described to me, the infancy of the long line program here was just out of a matter of they had a 206 at the time, and hoists really weren't a thing at that point for a 206, and so they wanted to do rescue here, and so they started with this is in the 80s. They're long lining out of a 206, and obviously you build upon that, and you move to aircraft type to the 407. Continuing the long line. What I can say about long line for us is that, this aircraft, our HECs, so our human limit on the hooks from the manufacturer is 1,160 pounds. So that's a lot of weight. And there have been rescues that we've done where you're lifting 3 people out at once. And, on a 407 sized helicopter, that's a lot, you're not going to lift that with a hoist. I mean, they don't make I know that CHP's hoist, I think, is limited to 450. The other thing that not having a hoist allows us to get away with here is the 2 crew. So the crew of 2 makes no difference. It's just, I think, again, there's total advantages to I hate to say it, for like the night long line stuff we do, really, like, you should be hoisting at night. Night long line, I get it. It's a little out there. I think we get away with it, and I hate using that term because, it's not just luck. We're not just hoping that we're going to get I hope this one goes okay. It's like we're doing that an exhaustive amount of training. But like night hoisting is absolutely what you should be doing. Night long line's a little out there, and I get that. But I think the flip side of that is we do so much long line here and have been doing it for so long that we do, and again, I bring up night long line. Night long line is not, I think that any long line that we're going to do, and really I'm sure any agency, and I'll just speak for ourselves, but when you decide to put that patient on a line, whether it's a hoist or a rope at the bottom of a helicopter, you have to have in your mind, the checklist has to be there of how do I, kind of going back to our earlier talk, how do I justify this? If something goes wrong, how do I justify what I'm doing? So, every long line that we do, and we do a lot of them, in the Real ResQ environment, we need to be able to justify. And so when you are now doing that at night, that's a much, I'll say, the daytime, like a daytime long line is a much different animal than night. And so the crew justification for what we're going to do at night, that needs to be pretty high up there.
Yeah.
I hate just throwing out, it's got to be life or death, but it's kind of got to be life or death. Like it's not,
that makes sense.
It's not something that you got to have a lot of maturity and a lot of, check your ego at the door sometimes, because it's like, that's a big time risky evolution. So
how many do you do a year? Not training. We'll talk about that too, but how many real life long line rescues does Henry One do in a year? Average.
We average about 300 long line rescues a year.
300. Wow, that's an important number for everybody to hear, because it gets back to what you're talking about. Yes, that nighttime stuff is higher risk and there's some factors, but the fact that you do 300 a year, that has got to help your confidence that you can do that safely, even though it is higher risk. Is that an accurate way to put that?
Yeah, I think, and I think that the night, I'll keep, the benefits of a small unit is that you've got a small group of people that do a pretty significant number of rescues a year. And so it's that playbook approach of, we debrief our calls as a unit. And again, we're not that big of a unit. So we have in-person debriefs about the calls we do. And so, if me and one of our pilots go and complete a call, well, that's going to be debriefed with the entire group. And so Larry can take that, or and vice versa. If Larry and Nigel go do a rescue, I kind of look at that. We video everything we do. And so, again, it's not Monday morning quarterbacking. It's just the being able to essentially have this playbook of like, okay, I've either been there and done that before, or another crew has that I've learned from, and I've kind of seen the way they did it. And so it's like, you kind of, I hate to say it, but the longer you do this, kind of like any job and obviously any unit, but again, with the amount of exposure that we get here, you build that playbook up pretty quickly. And so
sure do. 300 again. That is amazing. It really is. And that doesn't count. And then do you know about how many repetitions you do in a year as a unit in training on the long line? Do you have an idea?
I'll let Nigel tell that story, because he just was having a conversation with another agency that was like, hold on a second, how many do you do? So I'll let him tell that story.
Go ahead, Nigel.
We do a little bit more than 1,000 evolutions a year.
Sure.
Oh, geez.
So an evolution is a pick up to a set down. And the reason that I know that is we have to log that for the hooks on the helicopter. And, and so the 6-year-old helicopter has over 7,000 picks on it.
Wow, that's amazing. That number surprises me. The 300, I kind of knew. 1,000 a year training, that's amazing. That's why you guys are so good at what you do. From your perspective, Nigel, was Henry One, was that the first time you ever had a human at the end of a long line, or did you do that in the military at all?
That's a very great compliment for Larry. But
wow.
We have a lot of fun in our unit, and we poke fun at each other a lot. So
just a little.
The cool thing is we haven't put the line on the helicopter today, and they're very, very reluctant to give me any crap before we go long lining. I don't know why.
I think I know.
So the first time I had the guys on the line here was at Henry One. And I remember that the best thing is the load is talking to me. They've got hand signals, and they're like, "Hey, you need to level off, dummy." And I'm like, I've been missing this my entire utility career. that someone that's really close to the ground is like, "Hey, slow down," or "Hey, I need to go over there," and it really, really helps. And we have clearly defined hand signals, it's there's so many calls I can reflect on. One that comes to mind is the nun that we rescued in a swiftwater environment, and she was drowning, and we were rescuing this other family that she'd gone to help out, and they weren't really in dire need of rescue other than they were completely stuck in the middle of the river, and she's hanging on a branch above her head downstream, seconds away from being swept away and drowning. And we didn't know she was there because of all the debris in the trees from the floods or something. And I'm flying Chris in to get the last couple of members of the family, and he's like, change your plan, and he's pointing downstream. I'm like, what, where are we going? And he keeps pointing, and I could tell he was a little bit unsure. And then all of a sudden he's pointing at the trees. I'm like, over by that garbage bag, and I long line him in next to the garbage bag, and the rotor wash hits the water, and the garbage bag was the nun's veil covering her face, and it blew up, and there's this little face. She's hanging on to this branch, about to drown. And I'm like, that's where long line and a human on the end of the line comes into play.
Wow.
And Chris and I going straight to heaven.
Yeah, exactly. I've lived my life with complete, moral, impunity since that moment. So, and I wish he was embellishing. There's nothing, like, it was literally this nun, essentially, this family, just to recap, they get stuck, blah, blah, blah. This convent from like Visalia had been at the river, kind of looking at the high waters, and then saw what was going down before we got there. And so divine intervention, obviously, she was trying to go swim out with a rope from the back of their car, got swept downstream. And then as I was rescuing the mom, there was 2 kids and a mom and dad. And as I was rescuing the mom, I said, is there anyone else besides your husband left? And she's like, yes, and the sister. And I'm just like, your sister? Like, what? And then I'm like, when we did our wire recon before we initially did the rescue, I was like, I did see like nuns on the shore, like with like habits, like they were like, because I remember thinking like, that's kind of odd that there are these like nuns just walking along the shore. And then it was like, oh shit, there's like, I think she's saying there's like another person downstream. And sure enough, it's like, there she is. So again, it goes back to like Nigel. It's like, he's got to trust that when I'm giving him that hand signal, like he thinks it's a garbage bag, but sure enough, it's the nun in the full habit hanging on for dear life. So
wow.
Yeah.
Great story.
Jeez.
You guys are gold.
Yeah, totally.
Larry, you're going to have to find a nun to rescue, I think.
That's very true.
To carry the time is flying by, and I want to make sure we get to something here that is very important to this conversation. And then we'll, when the time we have left, we'll kind of come back to some things. But we're going to talk about something right now that is very personal to Chris and to everybody here, but very personal to Chris. And I want our listeners to know that I cleared this with Chris before we decided to put this into our questions, because this is very personal. It was a very impactful thing. And I would never surprise any guest with something like this. And you'll understand when you hear this. All of us in law enforcement know that our jobs professionally and personally intertwine. I mean, we've all gone to work and left our families, to do our work, in different capacities, especially in times of trouble and natural disasters and all sorts of things like that. This story impacted me in a big way when I heard it. And I asked Chris if he was willing to share it. And he didn't blink and said, absolutely. So before we get to your personal side of it, Chris, set us up with the Tubbs fire, the overview of what was going on with that fire. And then we'll shift into your professional and personal life and how they intertwined into this fire.
Thank you to our sponsor, CNC Technologies. CNC Technologies, serving law enforcement, government, and military markets with tailored mission solutions, system training, and live 24/7 support with CNC.live platform. Explore more at cnctechnologies.com.
Yeah, so the Tubbs fire was one of the complex of fires that occurred here in Northern California in 2017. Essentially, it was like any other Sunday. We had done a big SWAT thing all day with moving people around and doing this Bay Area-wide SWAT exercise thing. And so we had, needless to say, we had like a long day. I mean, we had done a ton of picks that day. And so, you fast forward to that evening, we'd had like a barbecue with, some of the guys from the unit, all the SWAT guys from all over the Bay Area. at the end of the day, super positive, great day. It's like 9:00 that night, get home from work. My wife and I had lived in our house for like 10 years. It's kind of a bizarre story with that I'll get to in a little bit. But so we had lived in our house for a long time. We were actually putting our house on the market on that Monday. And so house was super clean. And I'll never forget, like I'm pulling in the driveway at the end of this long night and the winds are just like, I mean, they are like, it's a different level of wind than I've ever seen here. And growing up here, it was just like, and so I remember my driveway as I'm pulling in is like covered in like bark. And I'm like, you're kidding me. Like I'm going to spend all this time getting the house all ready for like showings this week. It's listing tomorrow. I'm going to have to like blow all this stupid bark off. It's just going to be a mess in the morning, you know? So get home, wife and I go to bed kind of early, you know, I think we were in bed that night before 10 o'clock. And so, you know, go to bed and we have 2 dogs. We don't have kids. We have 2 dogs. And my little dog all night is just being like, I mean, they never bark at night. And the whole night she's like super just like barking. And then, you know, we'd like, what is going on? And so finally she's like, again, it's like the 3rd time she's like barking. It's like 2 o'clock, a little after 2 o'clock in the morning. And it's like, what on earth is the dog doing? So like, get her calm down, end up, you know, getting up to use the bathroom. And I'm coming back to bed and my phone, like, I get a message on I hear a text message on my phone. And I think, well, that's bizarre. Who's texting me at 2 o'clock in the morning? So I look at my phone and it's my neighbor across the street. And he's like, hey, is somebody pounding on your door? And I'm like, and we literally lived at the end of a private driveway. So I'm thinking, oh, that's why the dog, like obviously there's something going on, you know, and obviously she's gotten alerted to somebody banging on my door. So I'm thinking as a cop, like, oh, there's some, you know, who knows what I'm going to deal with, but there's some derelict or something banging on the door out front. So I open the door to our bedroom and my house is filled with smoke. And I'm like, oh God, this isn't like, I know why someone's banging on the door. My house is on fire or something's on fire. So I run up to the front of our house where we had 2 bedrooms and I can hardly see across the driveway to my neighbor's house. And I'm like, shit. And so I call him and I'm like, hey man, I don't know what's going on, but like there's clearly a fire like right here. Simultaneously, my wife gets a phone call from Larry's wife of all people. It felt like we were in a dream. And she's basically like, hey, are you guys okay? We lived up in its area of Santa Rosa called Fountain Grove. And she goes, hey, there's like fires all over Santa Rosa, including I've heard like Fountain Grove. Are you guys okay? And my wife's like, no, we're not okay. Like I hear like our house is filled with smoke. We're getting out. But like what it just felt like to say it was overwhelming is an understatement. We essentially, with the clothes on our backs, my wife grabbed her purse. I grabbed a backpack I had with a few, I say a few things in it, like my work backpack, so a gun, my wallet, jumped in our car, got our dogs in, grabbed our wedding album. But as we got into the garage, fortunately the power was still on, so the garage door came open, but I could see the ridge line above us was glowing. It was red. And so it was like, we just got to get out of here. So evacuated our house. We're stuck in some traffic trying to get, basically out to 101, the freeway that runs through our city. And initially my thought was, well, I need to get to the airport because I inevitably am going to be working, and I need to get to work. And so I called a buddy of mine that worked for one of our contract cities just north of Santa Rosa called Windsor. And so, and that's kind of where the airport here is located. And I remember he answers the phone. And I mean, at this point, you can just see the hills are on fire. There's a million cars everywhere. And I remember he answers the phone and I'm like, hey, man, I'm just coming to 101. I need to know, can I get north from Santa Rosa to the airport? And he said, I'll spare the language, but basically, quote, it's effing World War III up here. No, the freeway shut down. There's no way you're going to get north. You need to go south. Obviously, my priority is to, I have 2 priorities. My priority is to get to work because I know that there's obviously something massive going on. But I also know I need to make sure my wife and my my dogs are my kids. So it's like I need to make sure my family's safe. And so, my plan of action at that point, I have a brother that lives in Oakland, which is about an hour south of here. And so I essentially drove to Oakland, left my wife and my dogs with my brother. I don't know why. I ended up taking my brother's car back here. I mean, immediately. I think I was door to door in an hour and a half. And as I'm coming back into Santa Rosa, there was no one going north, so I was able to get back very quickly. But I remember I'm in this caravan, like there's all these fire engines from all these different Bay Area agencies, and I'm zigzagging between them because I know I'm not going to, let's be honest, getting pulled over was the least of my worries at that point. But I'm thinking, holy shit, I'm like going back into this firestorm. And, the closer I got to Santa Rosa, the freeway going southbound is just completely jammed. There's ambulances going up the center divide. It's pure chaos. And so I eventually make it to like the off ramp where our main office is located. And so Chippy is a CHP officer has traffic, is blocked off on the freeway and is diverting it onto the surface streets. And, at this point, everything, I'm looking at the hills are on fire, buildings next to where our agency are on fire, across the freeways on fire. It's just, it's like the world's essentially ending is what it felt like. And so I talked to this Chippy and I'm like, hey man, I work on Henry, again, everyone knows what Henry 1 is up here. And so it's like, hey, I work on Henry 1, trying to get to work. I badge him and he's like, dude, I don't think you're going to be able to make it. He lets me pass this barricade. I'm in my literally my pajamas. And so I make it probably a half mile north on the freeway, and there's a bunch of deputies that are stopped, blocking traffic at this point. There's a bunch of buses that are trying to do evacuations. I literally pull up behind these buses, the deputies. I happen to recognize one of the deputies there, and I remember I'm talking to him, and he's trying to figure out a way that we can get up to the airport. And I'm hearing on his radio inside his car, I lived on a court called Parker Hill Court, and I remember hearing a deputy say on the radio at just that split second of, I've got power lines down, Parker Hill Road at Parker Hill Court. And I was like, yep, my house has got, there's a reason why power lines are down in a fire. It's because the pole burned down. And I'm like, my house has to be gone. But it's like, I just couldn't think about it for very long. It's like, I need to go to work. So long story short, I make it back to our main office. A deputy we basically drove through a different fire zone, made it to the airport. And then my pilot that day was a longtime pilot here, Paul. So we started, at 6 a.m. at this point, we're flying. And I remember it was so surreal because when I say everything was on fire, it was when we lost over 5,000 houses in the city of Santa Rosa. So Santa Rosa has a population of about 165,000 people. So, 5,000 houses, that's a big chunk of the houses in this city. Not only did we deal with the Tubbs fire, which was essentially assaulting us from the east, but we had another fire called the Atlas fire, which was coming from Napa County. They were essentially converging on Santa Rosa. And so we got up, and the first request we got was from the EOC, and they said, hey, we just need you to give us an approximate acreage. And as soon as we got up, it was like, what are you approximate acreage? Everything's on fire. I can tell you the cities that are kind of not impacted, but everything else is on fire. And I remember, so we end up flying around, we did some rescues that morning. I remember we rescued a family that was trapped in a valley, and we had to land next to them, load them and their dog up. It was just it was chaos. And so flew all morning, refueled several times. And so about 11:30 that morning, I'm trying to not think about my house while I'm working. But the flip side was, at some point I need to see if my house is there or not. And, I'm also getting deputies that are texting me about, can we check addresses of either their houses, people, family members, friends. It was just a lot going on. So eventually about 11:30 in the morning, we'd cleared a call on the west side of Santa Rosa. I plug in my address at the time into the Aero computer, and I'm like, I'll never forget, I see the line on the computer. My pilot, Paul starts to turn towards that line. And I remember I'm like looking out of the cockpit, and the more we're turning, the more smoke there is. And I'm thinking, dude, just stop turning, man. Like, this is because the more left we were going, the worse it looked like we were going into. So needless to say, we eventually make it to my neighborhood. And I remember we pop over this hill and I look down, and it looks like it looked like I was like looking at like Tahoe after a blizzard. It was like everything on the ground. I mean, yes, there's smoke everywhere, but at this point, everything is just burned over ash. And I'm like, well, we're here, but I don't recognize anything that I'm looking at other than this church that was down the street from my house, which was still there. So sure enough, we're in the aircraft. We're over my neighborhood, and I can see very clearly that my house and every one of my neighbors' houses is, completely, when I say demolished, they just doesn't exist anymore. It's ash. And at that point, it's so early on that, everybody's natural gas lines are still, on fire. So to say it was overwhelming is an understatement. And I remember my pilot, I try to stay pretty even keel, good or bad. But, it was the first time in my life at work that I had ever teared up, especially inside of a helicopter. And I remember my pilot just looks at me and goes, I don't even know what to say, dude. And I'm like, I said, just give me a minute, man. And so, I kind of composed myself. And so we had a few more missions that we flew. And I remember the hardest part about it at that point was, my wife, who's an absolute sweetheart, she's sitting in Oakland with my brother, and she's trying to be positive, like sending me texts on the phone. And I remember I get this text from her, and she's trying to kind of make light of something. And I'm thinking, holy shit, man, like, obviously have to tell her this on the phone. I'm not going to text her back like, oh, by the way, the house is burned down. But I remember it's like, I'm looking at it, I'm like, this girl has no idea that as soon as I land, I'm going to basically give her, at this point in our lives, like the worst news that she's ever gotten. So that was tough, getting back to the airport. Before we even shut down, I was out of the aircraft making a phone call. And I hate to say this, and this isn't me being stoic or me being, like, it was tough. Don't get me wrong. But it wasn't just me. When you've got 5,000 of your neighbors, 5,000 other families that have gone through the same thing, within our own unit, it turned out that we had two, myself and another TFO and one of our pilots, we all lost houses. 29 of our deputies lost houses. So I hate to say misery loves company, but it's like, it's hard to feel bad for yourself when everybody's going through it. And maybe this just, I think for me, and I think everybody's different, is, my wife's a nurse. My wife's a really strong person. I don't have kids. So for me, it was like, I almost, being at work kind of made the situation a little bit more tolerable, because it felt like I was like, the subsequent days, yes, there was an overwhelming aspect of my home being gone. But the flip side was we were all okay. And I could now continue to work and make a difference. And, the community at that time really came together. And so coming to work, honestly, was like, I think the best thing that could have possibly happened for me.
Yeah.
So
I understand that. Oh my gosh. That is incredible. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
For sharing that. I will tell you that it was a couple days after that, I called Paul Bradley, who I got to know over the years, and said, hey, are you doing okay? He goes, yeah, I'm fine. And then he told me there were 3 houses lost within the unit.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me your story, how you found from the air, looked for your house and it's gone. And I remember really getting emotional and going, wow, that is beyond anything I've ever heard from an air crew in law enforcement. We've all seen things, but not too many people have seen their own house gone that they left hours ago. So now you're a strong guy, Chris.
Well, I appreciate it.
And I appreciate you sharing that, because it shows you, it really represents everything good in law enforcement, that law enforcement officers are willing to leave their own homes, leave their own families, and get to work. And they just go, and they don't know when they're coming home sometimes, if they're coming home. That happens all the time. But with natural disasters and things, that sort of thing happens. Earthquakes. My head hit the pillow at 0420 on the Northridge earthquake. At 0431, my house was shaking, and at 0530, I was back in the canine car going back into work, and I didn't come home for like 30 hours. And that was everybody. Everybody did that. Every SWAT guy, every air support guy, every canine person, every patrol officer. This sort of thing does come up. And I'm just glad that you shared it. And I'll just end this topic by telling you the Tubbs fire, 24 total deaths. Like Chris said, 5,300 homes lost, 36,000 acres, and 29 deputies losing their houses. 3 from a small aviation unit lose their houses. Just an amazing impact on your department, on your region, on your friends, on your families, on your community, and the fact that you were willing to go up there and continue to save lives, and all of you did that. All of you did that in your unit and in your department is so darn commendable, and it's what makes us proud. Well done.
Thank you to our sponsor, Shotover. Shotover Systems is the leading developer and manufacturer of high-performance gyro-stabilized cameras with advanced real-time AR mapping and mission management, all backed by unparalleled custom training and support. Now offering the M2 multi-sensor system, sole 6-axis EO/IR platform with 4K Ultra HD color and infrared technology. Ideal for law enforcement and defense. Offered with real-time AR overlays to quickly identify streets, weather, and traffic. Automated license plate recognition, 24 megapixel digital photographs, and automated steering and tracking.
I'll just echo that. And I'll say, I look at our agency as a whole, and something that was so interesting. We've unfortunately had some subsequent huge fires here since then, and so we've streamlined. I hate to say it, the process of kind of how we react to those is really streamlined as an agency and even as a unit. But what was so unique about that, and what I feel such pride for as a deputy here, is that not one, typically like an incident like that happens, there's like an all call to, all personnel need to respond. I'll just be honest. I think our agency at that time was so naive and kind of inexperienced with an event of that magnitude. There was no, all call made, yet almost every member of the department showed up. And, to me, that's like, and again, like we talked about, yes, 29 of us lost homes, but hundreds of us were evacuated. And so, it just goes to, I can't say enough positive things about the people that I work with here. The every agency, there's good and bad within agencies, but the people are what make the agency. And so I feel like we have just incredibly good people here, and that's a testament to it. So we're very fortunate.
Yes. But Larry, where were you during that fire, and did it affect you personally as well?
So I'd participated in that big SWAT event the day before. And at the time I was competing in the police fire motocross Olympics and motocross series down there at Glen Helen in San Bernardino.
Oh yeah.
So I was about to Bakersfield when I got a phone call saying, hey, all hell's breaking loose. It looks like we're going to lose most of Santa Rosa. At the time I lived in Windsor, and there was talk that Windsor was going to burn down too. So I turned around, drove all the way back. I got into town at about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. And to echo what Chris said, so I'm heading northbound on 101. It reminded me of the scene from like Independence Day. I was the only car going northbound. Everybody was just gridlock traffic southbound. And in fact, people were actually driving southbound in the northbound lanes on the freeway to get out of there. It was just absolute chaos. So again, without even being called, a bunch of us just went in. We self-deployed.
Sure.
So at the time, Windsor, a bunch of the units in Windsor were getting pulled to help with evacuations elsewhere. But there was a ton of calls for service in Windsor. So I jumped in a Windsor car and started just handling calls and evacuations up there. So I think I ended up working, it ended up being about 20 hours straight, after having been up for about 24 hours the previous day for the training. But, it's what we all do. And I'm sure that can be echoed across law enforcement across the nation. When things need to get done, the people will put in the work.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many examples. September 11th. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's probably the ultimate example. every firefighter and cop within, hundreds of miles showed up to ground zero.
Yep.
And many of them not knowing what was lying ahead, that they would be sick and dying of cancers and years later. It's just, but they didn't blink. They didn't blink. You guys didn't blink. Well done. John, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think in addition to what you guys describe, I think about, Chris, your wife being with her brother, and you talk about the unknowns of the spouses. We're all at work and we're all very aware of what's happening. The spouses oftentimes are away and wondering, well, what's happening, and the fear that she must have had, not only for the loss of her house, but for you, is what strikes me. You talk about the significant roles that our spouses play in these types of incidents. It's highlighted here, so I always have a lot of admiration for the spouses and the folks that are holding down the fort, so to speak, when we're away doing this stuff. But it's again highlighted in this specific scenario.
Nigel, you were not with Henry 1 at this time. Is that correct? This is just before your time there, but you were still in the region. Did you get affected by this particular fire?
Not really. However, I had my wife's sister was in town, and we were cycling around Napa when the fire started. And we don't get wildfires like this down under. Well, not New Zealand anyway. And I could not believe the speed at which it took off. And we drove back on Highway 37 only a couple of hours before that highway was closed with the fire crossing it by the racetrack there. And then just the constant sound of sirens heading north past where we lived in Marin County that night. And then the following week, I was flying myself back up to Oregon, and on my way out of Noss Airport in Nevada, flying over the top of Santa Rosa to look down and see the devastation and all the houses that were gone. It was I've never seen anything like that before. I could not believe the enormity of it. And, coming from the military where we often, went into disaster zones after, earthquakes, tsunamis and whatever, this was something else.
Yeah, I agree. The photos and video that I saw from Santa Rosa, I still remember looking at them and going, I can't believe what I'm looking at. The vastness of it. I mean, I'd been in neighborhoods that had burned down and, big fires and stuff and earthquake stuff. That was different. That was beyond comprehension. I'll never forget it. And it's just amazing. Things like this do happen, and our air crews need to be prepared for it. And you need to be prepared personally for it too. Amazing story. Well, the time has flown by. John, we could do this for a few more hours, couldn't we?
Yeah.
Because I had a bunch more stuff, but we really did cover a lot of ground in highlighting your unit. I'd like to just end on this topic and keep it as brief as we can. The ups and downs. I really wanted to get to that. The Henry 1, like we said, was like Chris explained, it has been around a long time, since the 60s, but there's been struggles. But this unit persevered, and they persevered, in my opinion, one of the reasons, because they saved so many lives. They do. And a lot of those people came in and fought for Henry 1 to remain in existence when the county or the sheriff's department would go, this is a very expensive operation. Yeah, but look at the lives that are being saved. Chris, talk about that briefly, about how it's changed, about that perseverance briefly, and then how it's changed to where now it's a stable situation in that realm.
Yeah, I think, long before my time up here, I think there were, you look at the recession in like 2008, and I think that was a real crunch time for the unit potentially being, eliminated. And so I remember coming to this unit and you'd hear like, sometimes they'll, every once in a while, when budgets get bad, they'll use Henry 1 as a political football. I hated that term because it's like, oh man, like, especially when you work up here and you see the good that's being done. And honestly, even being a patrol deputy and the work that they would do, again, it was always relieving hearing the helicopter get overhead when you're a guy on the ground. And so even back then, before I, obviously that was, quite disappointing, since that's what I had modeled my whole career was trying to get up here eventually. I think that as time has gone by, I really feel, again, our agency knows how important the helicopter is. That goes without saying. I think as a county, we have county supervisors. I think they've really, to say that they have bought into what we do is an understatement. I think it goes to how versatile we are, and I hate to say it, like the fires highlight, we've been instrumental in a lot of the fires here, whether it's been rescues, whether it's been, during fires, whether it's been, sizing up fires because they happen in the middle of the night and there's no other air assets available. I took two of our county supervisors on a fly along after a fire we had this summer, and again, them kind of being in the aircraft, seeing what we do real time with the technology. I think we're at a point now where, yes, everyone appreciates what we do, but I think they're getting it. And I'm typically a glass half full guy, but I also am a pretty big realist. And so I do see a difference now. And obviously actions speak louder than words. So when the aircraft, when there is no question about funding, when we're adequately funded, when they allow us to do our job, when they allow us to add better mission equipment, this constant evolving, it shows the commitment that they have. And so, I hate to say it's people long before me did a lot of hard work to get us to where we are today. And in some ways, I feel like I'm riding on their coattails because I kind of have it good because of what they did. But the flip side of that is, we need to keep doing good work and not, rest on our laurels. It's, always making, innovations when we can, but also remembering what our roots are and why we are Henry One and kind of what makes us us. So I think we're in a good position right now.
Perfectly stated, Chris. I really like what you just said, because every unit should be able to look at their unit and go, you know what? We had people before us that were absolutely amazing, but can we make it better? Yes, we can. We can all make it better. It's a team effort, and your team is solid. And the innovation and the technology and working together and, keeping that mission, as the top priority really makes a difference. Well done.
And I'll keep it brief. One thing I said to one of our supervisors, and I was just being very frank, is, at the end of the day, me as a supervisor here, I'm about, when it comes to the rescue side of the house, or even law enforcement, but I was highlighting the rescues, is that, at the end of the day, I don't care if it's the green helicopter that rescues someone, if it's the blue helicopter that belongs to CHP that rescues someone. To me, it's whatever's most appropriate for the patient. And so, yes, we don't have 24/7 coverage here. So if the Highway Patrol comes into Sonoma and does a rescue, or this has happened too, my TFO rides on CHP's hoist because that dynamically is better, or I have CHP's TFO paramedic on the bottom of my line because for whatever reason, that makes the rescue more appropriate. I said, at the end of the day, if that I don't run scared. So in the sense of, I don't need to justify my existence and think that, if they can see that this other agency can do it, they're going to shut us down. If we're on that thin of margins, then I guess get rid of us. And it's to me, it's just important that at the end of the day, we're taking care of our patients and our patrol guys and whoever's we got to work together to make this done. And so, so far so good. They seem to be on the same page, which is great.
That is fantastic. The future is bright. It really is, as it should be. But your attitude about that is perfect. It doesn't matter if it's an orange Coast Guard ship or the Chippies. It doesn't matter, but you and your crews are an integral part of life saving in Sonoma County. And it's so important that not only do you exist, but that you continue to evolve and expand. I think that's important. We'll quickly go around the horn here with some closing thoughts. Nigel, any closing thoughts for today?
There's two things that stick out in retrospect when we're talking about all the calls that we've completed and the stuff that we do. One is the diversity of what we do, where every day is different. You don't know what's coming around the corner. We have this saying, any given Tuesday, which I termed way back when I started, and my first day by myself was a Tuesday, and we had multiple drowning victims in Tamales Bay. the other thing is the teamwork and the camaraderie that we have, which you've seen today, just makes it a joy to work on this unit. And that's a function of everybody that's part of the unit and more importantly, the leadership. Don't take that for granted. Trust me, when we get on a call, we are very, very serious and dedicated and focused in achieving that mission. But we're all friends outside the unit, and that goes a long way towards, showing what a great culture we have here.
Absolutely. And a lot of diversity in music taste too, which I just thought I'd add.
And race.
Larry, closing thoughts for us.
Yes. Well, first off, thank you for having us. It's awesome to be able to tell our story. I've been a part of this unit for 5, 6, going on 6 years now. And, it's growing up and obviously knowing about Henry 1, I didn't actually really know exactly what the crew does. And so I think we're getting really good at being able to finally show the public, what we do on a daily basis. I know, when you come up here as a TFO, part of your duties is social media. So we're very big on social media. Both Chris and I have to post, we post rescues and, some law calls and stuff here and there, fire calls. So you got to get good at doing that. For the listeners, follow us, Sonoma Sheriff. Again, our department, we don't have a separate Henry 1 social media. And sometimes the people at our agency, the PIO and stuff, they like to call it the Henry 1's social media because a lot of the stuff on there is us.
The cool stuff.
Yeah, most every other post is us posting something. But so I would just say, hey, have the followers follow us. Again, we show a lot of what we do, a lot of videos. And it's nice to be able to tell our story.
Well, we were glad to have you, Larry. Thank you. Chris, any final closing thoughts?
I promise I'll keep it brief because I know I can talk. I just really appreciate you guys. I know that we're not the biggest unit in the world. Jack, I've known you for, of you going to, the aircrew course at LA, actually the week before the 2017 fire.
Yeah.
I've just had a tremendous, amount of respect, from your book of being required reading for all new TFOs here. I just really appreciate you taking the time to kind of highlight what we do. And, I'm just really fortunate not only to work here, but, now being, the last year and a half or so being the supervisor of this unit, I'm fortunate to work with the people that I do. And the people are what, the green helicopter and it looks cool, but the people are what makes it really work. So I appreciate it.
Well, Chris, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. Very, very kind. John Gray, the creator of the Hangar Z podcast. Any final thoughts?
I've got a lot, but I'll try to keep it short.
Keep it to like 2 hours.
Chris,
they got maintenance coming.
I echo what you say about Jack. I remember sitting in his class, a big auditorium full of folks, and never did I imagine getting to do something like this with Jack. He's done a lot for the industry. It's an honor to sit next to him and have these conversations. But it's been really cool to talk to you guys about your guys' program, what you're doing there is a model, I think, for agencies. For a lot of reasons. You look at the mission sets that you guys do. You guys not only do them, but you're proficient at them. You put a lot of effort and time into getting better. You talk about from a leadership standpoint, Chris. You talk about not resting on your laurels. I think the moment a leader does that in a program like what you guys have, you're in trouble. It sounds like you're looking for ways to be more effective and efficient, always looking to progress. And I think that's a key part of a successful program is having someone with that mindset and willingness to learn and grow and evolve, because things should evolve over time with new technologies and new ways of doing things. Just been really cool to hear you guys talk about it. The people, the personnel that you've put together to make these missions successful is amazing. Nigel, it's been really cool to hear your story. I really want to dig into your background and hear more. I'm sure you've got a million stories to tell. So at some point, we'll have to have each one of you on individually and talk about some of the things that you've seen and done over the course of your career. But again, just really, really impressed with your guys' capabilities. I think a lot of people listening might be in an agency where they don't have rescue missions. They don't fight fire. They don't do a lot of the things that you guys get to do. But I would say, I was in an agency like that, and we found other ways to make ourselves successful in other mission sets. I think, Chris, you talked about having the support of not just city council, but the county board of supervisors. Those are all important people to have on your side when you go through bad or challenging economic times. So look for mission sets that you can do outside of the law enforcement mission with your platform. We worked with economic development, we worked with engineering, we worked with Parks and Rec, we worked with all these different agencies to make ourselves useful outside of the singular law enforcement mission set. So I think it's really important to be, Eric Widener would call it a weed with multiple roots. If you're the weed with one root, challenging times come along, it's easy to pull you out. But if you got multiple roots, you're doing multiple different things, it's really challenging to pull that weed and get rid of it. So again, just thank you guys for your time and for your dedication to our craft. It's inspiring.
It truly is. And I'll just wrap it up and just say, I've been around Henry 1 for quite a while over the years. And from day one, I remember just being so impressed with the professionalism of everybody, the pilot, the TFO, and the paramedics, and the way you have done your job. And it's better now. I mean, it's just amazing. And again, small unit making a big difference. We hear all the time, "Oh, we're just a small unit." I don't care about that at all. You need to make a difference. Find a way to make a difference. Sonoma County Sheriff's Department, Henry 1, has found that way to make a difference. They have saved countless lives over the years and continue to do so. And it's, I feel lucky that I've created some friendships in that unit over the years, because I know the professionalism. I mean, we didn't even get to, I'd love to talk to Nigel more and Chris about the pilot requirements. I mean, I couldn't even apply there. The requirements are very high. It's a very professional group, and I just love what you do. I love how you do it. I love your enthusiasm, and we feel really lucky to have the three of you on today. Thanks for coordinating that in the hangar the way you did. We didn't know that. I didn't anyway. The three of you were going to be there at the hangar looking like this. It really made it special. Thanks for your effort on that. Thanks for being willing to share your stories and profiling Henry 1. So with that, thanks everybody for listening. Remember, you're going to learn a lot more about this unit from Quinny on the Real ResQ Podcast, and from Vertical Valor and Joe Bradshaw's photography and storytelling. There's a lot to learn about. That we can all learn from everybody else, but this unit in particular really always has stood out to me, where I have learned a lot over the years, and I learned a lot more today. So thank you again for joining us. With that, we'll catch you all on the next episode of the Hangar Z Podcast.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, CNC Technologies. CNC Technologies, serving law enforcement, government, and military markets with tailored mission solutions, system training, and live 24/7 support with CNC.live platform. Explore more at cnctechnologies.com. Thanks to our sponsor, Dallas Avionics, who provides innovative products to law enforcement, the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, military, air medical, search and rescue, and special missions operations. Dallas Avionics distributes OEM equipment, including communications equipment, digital audio systems, PA systems, flight tracking, and other mission-critical devices. Visit DallasAvionics.com for more details. Thank you to our sponsor, Shotover. Shotover Systems is the leading developer and manufacturer of high-performance gyro-stabilized cameras with advanced real-time AR mapping and mission management, all backed by unparalleled custom training and support. Now offering the M2 multi-sensor system, Sol 6-axis EO/IR platform with 4K Ultra HD color and infrared technology. Ideal for law enforcement and defense. Offered with real-time AR overlays to quickly identify streets, weather, and traffic. Automated license plate recognition, 24 megapixel digital photographs, and automated steering and tracking.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z Podcast. brought to you by Vertical Helicast and in partnership with Vertical Valor magazine. In this two-part series, we had the privilege of speaking with the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department, also known as Henry 1, including Unit Supervisor Chris Haas, Pilot Nigel Cooper, and TFO Lawrence Matelli. This conversation provided a deep dive into the impactful work of Henry 1, showcasing their mission profiles and the critical importance of training and teamwork in public safety aviation. We explored the collaborative efforts with other law enforcement agencies, emphasizing the essential dynamics that make their operations successful. As they shared personal stories from significant events, like the Tubbs fire, we gained valuable insight into the challenges faced by these dedicated professionals and the camaraderie that motivates them to serve the community in times of crisis. For more information, be sure to check out the accompanying article by Vertical Valor magazine, available now at verticalmag.com. We hope this episode's given you a greater appreciation for the hard work and commitment of law enforcement air support units like Henry 1. Thank you for listening, and be sure to join us next time for more inspiring conversations here on the Hangar Z Podcast.